Welcome to LeapFrogBI Academy course DM110, Load Precedence Solution. In this course, we're going to first describe the load precedence solution and talk about its role in deploying a LeapFrogBI project, and then we actually are going to deploy the solution. So to get started, let's take a quick look at the dimensional model that we've been working toward in previous courses. You can see that we have here a simple fact with 4 dimensions, nothing special. One of the first things we did was we created our data flow diagram for all of the that will get us to the point where we've created all of the target objects in our data model. So we have our promotion dimension. We created the data flow for that, the product dimension, location, date, and our fact table. With that in place, we went over to LeapFrogBI and we created all those components. The current state of those components are located in project CT150, which is where we are here currently. Now, in our previous course from this one, DM100, we talked about building components. We also talked about the environment variable requirement for our projects. So we can see here that all of our components are in the current state. Our configuration is built, and we have our archive built. So I'm going to go ahead and save this archive down to my local system here. And then I'm going to jump over there and extract the archive. Now, inside of this archive file, we have all of the components that were defined by while we were developing our project, as well as a configuration component. Let's now go back over to our project and download one more thing, and that's our load precedence solution, which is what we're going to be talking about during this course. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go and extract that as well. Okay, now we have everything here that we need to actually deploy the load precedence solution. Keep in mind that the load precedence solution is built specifically for the version of SQL Server that you're deploying to based on your project settings. In this case, I'm using SQL Server 2012. Okay, so I'm going to open up the precedence solution, and one of the first things we need to do is take a look at this README file. This README has all the steps itemized for deploying this solution. We're going to just step through this together, kind of skimming through this document as we go. So the first thing we need to do is actually build the LeapFrogBI project and deploy it to the desired file system location. We've done that. The next thing we need to do is actually run the configuration package, keeping in mind that we do have that environment variable requirement for the project. In our case, the environment variable that we need is located right here, LFBI console LA. That's the name of it for our development lifecycle. If I come back over to my environment variables on my local system, I can go ahead and take a look at that. So LFBI console LA, and I can see that in here I do have a connection string, and it's pointing to my server. Have my initial catalog here set to LeapFrogBI Academy, and so on. So I'm all set right there. Now let's jump back over to our instructions here. We need to actually run the configuration package. All right, so let's do that. I'm just going to run this manually. And it should be pretty quick to run. This is what creates the target objects that we need, such as the database. Let me refresh this. There we go. There's our database that we defined. We have our configuration table, our variables table. Everything we need is here now for us to deploy the precedence solution and begin building this data mart. All right, so what do we need to do here to actually deploy the precedence solution? First, we need an environment variable, once again, that the load precedence is going to point toward, called LFBI Precedence. I've already created this environment variable. We'll quickly take a look at that as well. And it's right here. Now, in this case, I'm actually using the same database for my precedence solution as I'm using for my data mart. That's totally optional. You could use different databases. If, for example, you have several data marts and you want to control them all through the same load precedence, that's perfectly fine. I chose to keep them in the same database. Okay, so we have our environment variable set up. So we can move to the next step. And the next thing we need to do is actually create the precedence table by running this precedence create SQL. So I'm going to just open up that SQL statement. I've set my target database to the database where I want to deploy my precedence solution, and I'm going to run this script. Refresh my table list, and now I have my precedence table in place. All right, next step, create the assigned task stored proc. Okay, so this is a store procedure that's actually going to be responsible for looking for tasks that can be assigned at the time that we run this stored proc and actually assigning them to available workers. And we'll be talking about these poll and worker concepts in just a moment. All right, so we have our stored proc required here, deployed. Now we need to go ahead and create two types of jobs. We've got to create a poll job and a worker job, or a set of worker jobs. So let's start with the poll job. The poll job, I'm going to run this script right here. This poll job's responsibility is to, every time it executes, it's going to go out and run a package, which is one of the things that we need to update in this stored proc. There's instructions here. There's two things we need to update, and that is the login user and the location of my BI poll table. This is the correct location here. But what this job is going to do is it's actually going to execute that SSIS package. And when it does so, that package will then execute that stored proc that we just created, which will go out and assign tasks to workers. Now, the next thing we need to run is our actual worker job or set of jobs. And again, I've got to put in the login user as well as the path to my actual BI worker package. I have a few optional settings here. I'm just going to leave them as is and execute this. So now we can see that we have our poll package, and I selected to create 10 worker jobs. So this is saying that we can actually execute up to 10 things at one time, or 11 things in this case. So this is an easy way to actually control how much resources we're going to be using. If I just create more workers here, these are generic workers, then more workers will be available to rerun in parallel. Of course, the precedence definitions are going to actually determine what can and cannot be run in parallel, but this sets the maximum amount of parallelism that it will be available. All right, back to our instructions. We're going to now run our BI reset, or create our BI reset job. Now, the reset job's role is to reset the precedence. If we're loading our data mart once a day, then the precedence table is going to be tracking which tasks have been completed, and which ones are pending, which ones are currently running, and so on. At the end of the day, or after the end of the load, all of those tasks should be complete. In order to reset that, we need to set all tasks back to pending so that it all just happens again. I'm going to go ahead and disable our poll job for now. So now the poll job is running on a very short schedule. Maybe every 30 seconds would be fine, or 10 seconds even is fine. It's just always going out and polling and looking for tasks to be assigned. All right, jumping back to our instructions here. Load the precedence table. Okay, so what we want to do is in our precedence table, we want to actually load in all of the task based on our deployed configuration. So if I come back over here and we look at our configuration, again, this was created whenever we ran that configuration package, we can see that we have in here configuration for all of the components that were included in our project. Well, this is used by this precedence load script to seed into the precedence table the a record for every component with default values. So that's done. Now we have in our precedence table a record for every component in our in our data mart project. All right, let's go back to our instructions again. Now we need to actually update that load precedence table. And the easiest way to update the load precedence table that I've found is to actually just copy this data over to Excel and then work with it here. Now I've already updated this information, but I want to quickly describe what each of these fields do so that you understand what the features are that are included in this solution. Now, all the field definitions are also located here in this document in Appendix A. It describes how each of them work as well as gives examples of their input. First of all, the task ID is just an identity. It's the primary key of this table. The data mart name is just the name that you give this data mart. Nothing special there. The only thing to know is that that is the name that's going to be used each time I run the load precedence script. So as long as that name is matched by a record that's in the precedence table, then it's going to consider it to be the same record in combination with the actual component name. So these are the component names that line up with all the packages that I've built and saved locally. I have my component directory. This was all created for me by default whenever I ran my script. I just filled out a couple of variables there. So this is pointing to where my component packages are stored. I have a source system name here. And that's not actually what I want it to be. I want to put that in like, go ahead and update that. It should all say AdventureWorks 2012. That's where my source system is for all of these components, with the exception of my date component. And I will update that guy right here. And I'll just say generated. All right, run days. So which days of the week do we want these components to run? If it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's going to run every day. If I skip one of those numbers, it's going to skip that corresponding day. Disable means just disable this component or not. The start and the min and max start time, that's the window that's available to actually run this component or begin running this component. And then we get over to these 4 fields here. We have 2 finish to start precedents, phase order, group order. Phase order 0 runs before phase order 1. Within phase order 1, we're going to run group 0, then we're going to run group 1 and group 2, and so on. So these are both finish to start. Within a group, we can have series. So you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different series in group 0. With all of these series can run in parallel, but if series is going to respect its sequence. So series 1 can run at the same time as series 2, but within series 1, we're going to run sequence 1 before sequence 2. And within series 2, we're going to run sequence 1 before sequence 2. Then we have a max retry and max retry interval. It's 5 minutes. We're going to do it 4 times. I'm going to reduce that to a 1-minute retry. Then we have an allow failure. That just means that we're going to go ahead and move on with our precedence if this component fails. If it's set to 0, we're not allowing failure. Set it to 1, we are. Job assigned to, the precedence solution will write in here the worker that's assigned this task, the worker name. So it'll say BI worker underscore 05, for example. The status of this task, 0 meaning pending, 1 is assigned to a worker, 2 is running currently, 3 is complete, and -1 is an error. And job try count, how many times does this task run? Job status modified, what is the date time when it was last run? So what I've done here is I've gone through my data flow diagram and I have created or assigned each of these tasks the correct precedence definition so that they're run in the order that this solution requires. Jumping back over here, you can see that initially all I'm doing is running my stage and then PSA. Stage and then PSA. I'm doing this for all of the stage and PSA. I like to get all that done up front. Then I move down into my, first this is an existing dimension, we run that guy. And at the same time, we're running our promotion here in a series. But this series has a precedence 1, 2, and 3, so DS, then DIM, then DULLS. Again, just by referencing my data flow diagram, I can get this precedence and fill these numbers out. They don't necessarily have to be physically ordered in this way. I just like to order them this way and then fill out the precedence definition afterwards. And then I just moved on down the line and set all the precedents for all the components that are in this solution. Now, with that done, I can just simply copy this information, and I'm going to go back over to my precedence table here, and the easiest thing to do is just delete what's in there and paste everything from my Excel workbook. Looks good. Everything is as I would expect. You can just query it to make sure it looks good. You do have to pay particular attention to these time fields. Sometimes when you copy and paste from Excel, those don't work out just right, but just double check to make sure you have time in there in the right format. Okay, so it looks like we are good to go there. So we've updated our precedence table, and now we're actually ready to run things. That's it. We're all set up. So I'm going to go back over here, and if everything is set like we would like, then we should be able to just take our, I'm going to run this precedence monitor SQL here so we can watch what's going on. We can see right now that our job status is 0. If I enable this BI poll, then it should start polling, and it's actually looking for tasks to be assigned. As soon as it does assign a task, we're going to see that the job status is going to change to a 1. So right there we can see that they're all 1s. They're the 2s that you see. It means that those are actually assigned to workers now. So worker 4 has these 2. That's because these had to be run in a sequence, 1, 2. 2 means this one's running right now. This one will run next. Once I refresh again, all these are probably going to be done. It'll be on the next step. Yeah, it is. So now it's all these have been assigned to the workers that are listed. Those are done. So if you have a small solution like this one, it might run so fast you can't even keep track of what's going on. But you can see how it's just kind of working its way down all of these tasks. And it is, since this is the first time I'm running this solution, it's actually creating all the tables that are required. It's going out and collecting the data, of course, and moving it through all the components that were included in the solution. And in the end, we're going to actually have our data mart in place and load it. It's just about done here, so we're just going to let it keep running. Right now it's loading, so FS, that's our fact source for sales order detail. That's our fact table. After it's done with this set, it's going to run the secondary fact table update with the sales order header information. Remember, that was required to make sure that our territory ID, which is what's used as the business key for location, we had to run that to make sure that any asynchronous changes between the header and the detail were captured. Okay, so everything ran. It's done. So if I come over here now and I refresh my table list, you can see that I now have everything that this project defined, created, deployed, and loaded. My data mart's in place. If I want to load it again tomorrow, the only thing I have to do is just run this guy. And typically I'll set that up on a schedule so that it resets my solution at the time that, that I want the solution to actually load. So I just reset it. This is just simulating this happening again tomorrow. You can see that it's going through and doing the same thing. If I go look at some of the stuff I have created here, my fact table, for example, I can see that that has all my foreign keys in here as I've defined. I've got my facts in here. That's, of course, I take a close look at things, but that looks like everything is just fine. My promotion dimension. I have my surrogate key here. I've got an unknown member. I've got my business key on special offer ID and all those attributes we asked for. In product, same situation here. Got my surrogate, my slow change dimension tracking, my dimension key. Now I have a lot of different attributes that we're tracking here, including that hierarchy that we created. So it looks pretty good here too. Dim location, same situation there. Pretty small dimension, but it's in place. Dim date, that was an interesting one because it was an existing dimension. Remember that we profiled an existing date dimension, which we stored here in this Academy Common, just simulating having shared dimensions. So this is the actual dimension that we're pointing to. So everything is in place. Our load precedence solution is deployed. I just set it up to run again, so let's just go see what the status of that is. It's probably more than likely it's already done, and it is. So that's it. That's the load precedence solution. Again, take a look at the README. It goes through these steps in a little more detail. Once you get this solution deployed, it's very simple to maintain. All you need to do is take care of that precedence table, this table here, keeping it up to date with any changes in precedence. And anytime that you need to add new components, you can just simply run that precedence load script once again, and it's going to load in any new components that you've created. All right. That's the end of the load precedence course. We'll see you in the next course.